Okay, let's dive in. Think about the intense environment of a maximum security prison. It's this confined world where lives, often very different lives, collide under extreme pressure.
Absolutely. And today we're looking at a really stark, tragic example of that intersection.
We are. We're digging into the events surrounding the murders of Jeffrey Dahmer and Jesse Anderson back in 1994, killed by Christopher Scarver, another inmate. We're basing this entirely on the source material provided.
Yeah, the material covers quite a bit Scarver's history, what the conditions were like inside Columbia Correctional Institution, how Dahmer and Anderson ended up there, and of course what happened that day and afterwards.
So our mission here is to really unpack the key moments from these sources, look at the motivations as they're presented, and pull out some of the frankly surprising details to get a clearer picture of how this all unfolded.
And to really understand Scarver's role, we have to go back well before 1994, his life before this final incarceration. It paints a picture of some pretty significant struggles.
The material gives us his background. Born July 6, 1969 in Milwaukee, he went to James Madison High School, but dropped out in 11th grade.
And the sources mention early issues like drinking and drug use starting young, apparently serious enough that his mother eventually forced him out of the house.
But then there's this period, right, where it seems like he might be turning things around. He got hired as a trainee carpenter, Wisconsin Conservation Corps.
That's right. And the material suggests his supervisor, Edward Patz, even indicated there might be a full-time job for him down the line, a real opportunity.
But that promise evaporated when Patz was dismissed. Scarver didn't get the job. And this seems to be a critical point according to the source material.
It looks that way. He already had this history of addiction, alcohol, marijuana, and after this setback, the material says he started drinking heavily again. And crucially, this is when he reportedly began hearing voices.
Voices telling him he was the chosen one. That's a major red flag for serious mental health issues.
Definitely. Which brings us, unfortunately, to the event that landed him in prison in the first place. The 1990 murder of Steve Lohman.
So what happened there? The material says he went back to that trading office, armed.
Yes, he confronted the site manager, John Fyan, and another employee, Steve Lohman. He forced Lohman to the ground at gunpoint, demanding money from Fyan.
And Fyan gave him, what was it, 15 pounds? The source uses pounds sterling, which is odd, but that's what it says.
Yeah, it's a specific detail in the material. And getting just that small amount apparently sent Scarver into a rage.
What did he do?
He shot Lohman once in the head, killed him instantly.
Oh my God.
And it gets worse. The sources describe him then turning the gun on Fyan, saying something menacing like, "Now do you think I'm kidding? I need more money." And then he shot Lohman's body 2 more times.
Just unimaginable violence. It really speaks to his state of mind at that moment, based on what we're reading here.
Absolutely. Fyan, terrified, managed to write a check for $3,000. While Scarver was looking at the check, Fyan made a run for it.
Did Scarver try to shoot him?
He did. Fired twice as Fyan ran, but missed. Scarver was caught soon after, and Fyan identified him.
Now here's a really critical piece from the material. Something that happened before his trial for Lohman's murder.
Right. While awaiting trial, he underwent psychiatric evaluations. And this finding, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The material also mentions messianic delusions, this belief that he was some kind of chosen savior figure.
So a serious psychiatric diagnosis was established before he was convicted of that first murder. That's huge.
It is. Yet, despite that diagnosis existing prior to the trial, he was still charged with first-degree murder. The trial was in 1992. Fyan testified, the jury found Scarver guilty, and he got life in prison.
And that's how he landed in the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin, where eventually his path would cross with probably the most infamous serial killer of the late 20th century.
Jeffrey Dahmer. He arrived at Columbia in 1994, not long after Scarver.
Dahmer's situation was different initially, though. The material says he spent his first year in solitary confinement. For his own safety, obviously.
Understandable, given his notoriety. But during that time in isolation, the sources say he apparently found religion, embraced Christianity.
Yeah, he was even baptized in the prison whirlpool in April '94 by a minister named Roy Ratcliffe, who the material says became a sort of spiritual guide for him.
But Dahmer being there, it was a major issue for some inmates, including Scarver. The source material specifically mentions Scarver kept a newspaper clipping about Dahmer's crimes. He was fixated on it.
And those crimes. The material briefly recaps the horror. Luring young men, drugging, murdering, dismembering them, keeping body parts, skulls, skeletons in the fridge, just Gruesome.
Incredibly gruesome. And the material touches on a very sensitive point. Many of Dahmer's victims were young black men.
Right, similar in background to Scarver himself. The sources note conflicting views here. Some people believe Dahmer specifically targeted black men. While Dahmer maintained race wasn't the primary factor, it was more about body type. We're just presenting what the sources say here.
Exactly. And there's this contrast presented in the material between how the prison authorities might have seen Dahmer maybe repentant, following rules, finding God, and how Scarver saw him.
Which was?
According to the material, Scarver saw him purely as the unrepentant killer of young black men. Someone who felt zero remorse for these unbelievably cruel acts, the drugging, the rape, the dismemberment.
And the sources provide some really disturbing details about Dahmer's behavior inside prison, things observed by Pastor Ratcliffe or other inmates.
Yeah, these details are unsettling. The material suggests Dahmer actually seemed to relish his notoriety.
Making jokes about cannibalism, saying, "I bite," to guards who were nervous around him.
Exactly. Apparently playing up his own terrifying persona. Pastor Ratcliffe is quoted in the material describing it as a kind of morbid humor Dahmer's used to cope. But you can see how others wouldn't see it that way.
Especially this other detail from the material. Making fake limbs out of prison food. Covering them in ketchup to look bloody and leaving them around.
Yeah, just bizarre and provocative behavior. And for someone like Scarver, already disgusted by Dahmer's crimes, this kind of thing was apparently seen as proof that Dahmer was reveling in his celebrity killer status.
The material quotes Scarver directly on this. He crossed the line with some people, prisoners, prison staff. Some people who were in prison are repentant, but he was not one of them.
So the tension was palpable, and it wasn't just Scarver. The material mentions Dahmer had already been attacked once before in prison.
Right, July 1994, just a few months before his death. An inmate named Osvaldo Dorothy tried to slash his throat with a makeshift razor during chapel services.
The wounds were superficial, thankfully for Dahmer then. He claimed he didn't even know the guy. But his reaction, telling his mother, "It doesn't matter, Mom, I don't care if something happens to me." It's quite telling, isn't it? Almost fatalistic.
Which leads us right to that specific morning, November 28th, 1994.
The source material describes the scene. Scarver, Dahmer, and one other inmate, Jesse Anderson, were assigned to a work detail together, cleaning the prison gym bathrooms.
And Jesse Anderson, the material notes briefly, was serving life for murdering his own wife. And importantly, he had initially tried to frame 2 black men for the crime.
Another layer to the dynamic. And a key detail the sources point out, nobody seems to know whose decision it was to put these 3 specific men, Scarver, Dahmer, Anderson, on the same unsupervised detail.
Unsupervised. That jumps out from the material. In the showers of the prison gym.
A decision or perhaps an oversight that proved fatal.
So what happened? The material says around 8:10 a.m., Dahmer's body was found on the floor of the bathrooms.
Unresponsive. He'd suffered massive blunt force trauma to his head.
And the weapon.
Found nearby, a 20-inch metal bar, apparently from the weight room equipment, used to beat him about the head and face. Repeatedly, it seems the material mentions blood spatter on the walls.
Just horrific. He was still breathing when they found him, but pronounced dead just after 9 a.m. at the hospital.
And Jesse Anderson was found close by, also bludgeoned with the bar. He survived initially, but was taken off life support and died 2 days later.
And Scarver. What did he do immediately after, according to the sources?
He didn't flee, didn't hide. He calmly walked back to his cell block and told a guard what he'd done.
What did he say?
The quote in the material is chillingly direct. "God told me to do it. Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead."
Wow. He later gave a bit more detail to a journalist, didn't he? The material mentions that account.
Yes. He apparently said that right before attacking Dahmer, he confronted him with that newspaper clipping he'd saved.
What about the cannibalism and murders?
Right. He said he asked Dahmer if he did those things because I was fiercely disgusted. He described Dahmer looking shocked. Then, Scarver said, he hit Dahmer twice in the head with the metal bar.
And then Anderson.
Then he went and attacked Anderson, who was apparently working in a slightly different part of the shower room at the time.
So after this, the legal process kicks in again for Scarver.
It does. He was assessed again for mental competency. And despite that pre-existing schizophrenia diagnosis from years earlier,
he was found competent to stand trial for these 2 murders. It's complex, right? Competent for trial doesn't mean cured or not mentally ill.
Exactly. It means he was deemed capable of understanding the charges and assisting in his defense. So he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
He pleaded not guilty at first.
Initially, yes, but the material says he later changed his plea to no contest.
Why the change?
Apparently, it was part of a deal. In exchange for that plea, he'd be transferred to a federal penitentiary, likely out of the Wisconsin system.
And the outcome?
He was found guilty, unsurprisingly, and got 2 more life sentences. Consecutive, no chance of parole, ever.
The material includes a reported quote from him around that time when asked if the sentence was just.
Yeah. Nothing white people do to blacks is just. A really stark comment reflecting his perspective.
So what happened to him after that? Where did he end up?
Well, the transfer happened. He was eventually moved to the Wisconsin Secure Program Facility, a supermax, when it opened in 2000. But the material notes that the following year, he was actually one of about 3 dozen seriously mentally ill inmates who were relocated from that facility.
Interesting. So concerns about housing severely mentally ill people in that kind of supermax environment.
It seems likely. Eventually, he ended up incarcerated out of state at the Centennial Correctional Facility in Colorado.
And from there, the material mentions he filed a lawsuit.
He did, in 2005, a federal civil rights suit against officials back at the Wisconsin facility, WSPF. He argued he'd been subjected to cruel and unusual punishment.
His claim be.
That he'd been held in solitary confinement for 16 years straight, specifically because he killed Dahmer and Anderson, and that this violated his constitutional rights.
What happened with the lawsuit?
A district judge dismissed the case against several officials, ruling that the actions of the remaining ones couldn't be considered unlawful under the circumstances. His appeal in 2006 failed, and he later dropped the suit entirely.
So where is he now, according to the sources?
Christopher Scarver remains an inmate at that same facility, the Centennial Correctional Facility in Colorado. The material indicates he continues to receive treatment for his diagnosed mental disorders.
And there was that mention in 2012 about a book.
Yeah, a literary agent reportedly announced Scarver planned to write a tell-all book about killing Dahmer. But as the material notes, it's unknown if that book will ever actually materialize or be released.
So that brings us pretty much full circle on the events described in the material. We've traced Christopher Scarver's troubled path, his documented mental health issues even before the first murder conviction.
Looked at Jeffrey Dahmer's notorious presence and, frankly, provocative behavior within the prison walls, as reported in the sources.
And examined that specific fatal intersection on November 28, 1994, in that unsupervised work detail. We've really just tried to extract the key details and perspectives presented in the source material you shared.
Right, sticking closely to what the sources described about the individuals, the setting, and the events.
It leaves you with a lot to think about. And drawing only from the details presented in this source material, Scarver's diagnosed schizophrenia and delusions before 1994, Dahmer's reported behavior inside prison that Scarver found so offensive, and the fact they were left unsupervised together. What does this specific account suggest to you, our listener, about the sheer difficulty, the immense challenges of managing individuals with severe mental illness alongside notorious, potentially provocative inmates within the confines of the correctional system? It's a really complex picture the material paints.